Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to the Hoplite channel. Yes, I have missed you, and I can only assume you have missed me as well. But it's okay, we've been reunited. For this episode I put together, entitled, Ukraine. That's all, folks. Yeah, so the war in Ukraine. I've done a series of videos on this topic, and this will be the conclusion to my coverage of the war in Ukraine, as I believe we're almost 5 months into it. It's a fait accompli. This war is essentially over. The United States is slowly but surely backing its way out the door, washing its hands of the situation. And I predicted this from the get-go. I knew that the United States, in our current state, was in no way, shape, manner, or form fit to support this proxy war in Ukraine against Russia. And Russia knew it. And now we are 5 months into the conflict. Russia is hitting key targets daily. Ukraine is suffering catastrophic losses daily. And anybody who has a remote knowledge of military affairs, of war strategy, can see where this is going. And it's a shame. So I wanted to do this last video before I conclude this series, because I think it's sad. But unfortunately, Ukraine is a pawn among countries wedged between the West and the East, between the US and Russia. And they had the misfortune of choosing the wrong side. And in reality, if they had just kept their neutrality, they would have fared much better. But they didn't. They threw in with the United States. The United States and the EU and NATO promised them luxury and comfort and delivered none of the above. And now the entire country of Ukraine is probably teetering on the brink of full collapse. And I say that with no hyperbole. We are now almost a half of a year into this war, and that's how perilous the situation is. But let's recap and talk about what happened and where I think this is going, and this will be my conclusion for my coverage. I did the Empire of Lies speech to open this series. I did a second video on Putin's 2007 speech, which definitely foreshadowed the Empire of Lies speech, and how this is truly a brother war, and the United States and the Western powers, by sticking their nose in this, simply aggravates it, and aggravates it almost exclusively to the detriment of the Ukrainian people. Okay, but let's recap. Right here we see February 24th, 2014, the Maidan coup. Yanukovych is ousted. Yanukovych was, of course, the president that was installed most likely by the Kremlin, and he kept the peace in Ukraine, but he and his administration was loyal to Putin and Russia. The Western powers, via some nefarious forces in the United States government, decided to launch a color revolution. Yanukovych was ousted. He fled to Russia. The Zelensky government takes over, and what happens after that? Well, on 15th of 2022, Biden says the U.S. has no missiles in Ukraine and does not seek to destabilize Russia. Why would he say that prior to the Russian invasion? It's because they knew what was going to happen. The United States government knew exactly what they were doing with Ukraine by helping launch this coup, and they were going to move the borders of NATO closer to Russia, up against Russian borders. They were going to use Ukraine as a vassal state, and they were going to move NATO weaponry into Ukraine for the purposes of setting up military installations there, hopefully one day being able to use them against Russian forces should a kinetic war kick off. Russia beat the United States to the punch. And that's what happened on the 24th of February. Russia begins its special military operation in Ukraine. And like I said, we're about 5 months into that special military operation. But what has happened since the February 24th invasion? The US, the EU, and others have announced full sanctions and measures against Russia. Yeah, not to destabilize, right? Nobody used that word. Yeah, Biden didn't use that about a month earlier. So what happens? The U.S. does exactly the opposite of what it said it never intended to do. And the sanctions that the U.S. and the EU and NATO and the Western countries have launched at Russia are unprecedented. And they have almost entirely backfired. Everything the Western nations have tried to do to Russia have boomeranged on them twofold. The United States, it's July 2022 right now, we're in mid-July. We have 9.1% inflation in the United States, which is the highest rate of inflation in over 4 decades. The ruble, on the other hand, is trading against the dollar at a higher rate than, I believe, in the last 30 years. So, yeah, sanction Russia to the hilt. Well, turns out Russia controls so many commodities and has enough alliances with Russia, India. Russia has enough alliances with India, China, South Africa, and Brazil. They can weather this storm and they can come up with their own methods of sanctioning the West right back. Then we jump to May 21st. Biden signs a $40 billion congressional aid package to Ukraine. Now, I wanted to do a video back in May about this, but I figured I would wait to see how it plays out. But, it just goes to show you that the United States government never took this situation seriously, right? They helped launch a coup in the Maidan coup against the Yanukovych government. And then what happens? Like 8 years later, they come up with a $40 billion aid package to do what? This country is being invaded by the 5th largest army in the world, and they just throw $40 billion at them. What was the rationale behind that? That money's not intended for the Ukrainian people or for the Ukrainian military. It's money laundering. That $40 billion is intended to divvy up among the people that helped oust Yanukovych in the Ukrainian government, and then they're supposed to take their cut and then filter it back to our people in the United States. That $40 billion is as good as gone. It's true. But then what happens? We go to June 2nd. The Ukraine government admits that Russia now controls 20% of the country. So that's 20% of the country in the first week of June following the February 24th invasion. So, yeah, 4 months and you lose 20% of the country, which means it's probably closer to 30%, right? Whenever military sources tell you what they've suffered, you can probably add at least 15 to 25% of that figure. And that's being conservative, right? They say 20% of Ukraine. Ukraine is a massive country. If you look at it on a map, and I mentioned that in videos prior, for the Russian military to have conquered 20% of Russia, that's like taking over the state of Mississippi in less than 4 months. It's devastating. And the Ukrainian military, the high command, the Zelensky administration, is throwing everything they got at eastern Ukraine. And they're getting their clocks cleaned. If they lose their professional military in eastern Ukraine, there is nothing stopping the Russian military from marching westward. Literally nothing. They will not be able to mobilize or even train replacement troops in time for that new offensive. And I had some figures here that I wanted to go over with you that I just looked up on today, which is July 17th. But after this $40 billion was sent off to Ukraine and the government admits 20% of the country is gone, Joe Biden, the United States president, says, well, he warned Zelensky about Russia, but Zelensky didn't want to hear it. And what does that sound like? That sounds like somebody who's calling you up to break up and says, it's not you, it's me. Maybe I'm just not ready for this. And hey, I always told you that we would always be friends, right? You know that. Okay, I gotta go. I'll talk to you next week, maybe. That is what the Biden administration is saying. And I want to read this quote. It's from the Washington Post. And it's a terribly written article because I believe the Washington Post is outsourcing their articles to 15-year-olds, but we'll read it anyway just to see what President Joe Biden said. And here's the article by the Washington Post that was published, I believe it was June 11th. And it says, quote, I know a lot of people thought I was maybe exaggerating, the president said, according to the AP. Biden said that he, quote, knew we had data to sustain that Russian President Vladimir Putin, quote, was going to go in off the border. All right, well, now that quote actually sounds like Joe Biden said it, because who talks like that? We knew he was going to go in off the border. Well, no, are you sure he wasn't going to go under the border? Anyway, he continues, quote, there was no doubt, and Zelensky didn't want to hear it, nor did a lot of people, Biden said, according to Bloomberg. Quote, I understand why they didn't want to hear it, but Putin went in. Yeah, Putin went in, right? Vladimir Putin just walked in with his cowboy boots on. Ukrainian officials, however, rejected Biden's account. This guy's name is insanity, but Serhiy Nikiforov, we'll just call him Sir, a spokesman for Zelensky told Ukrainian news website LIG that Zelensky had 3 or 4 telephone conversations with Biden in the period before the invasion, in which the two leaders discussed the situation. He added that Ukraine had called for preventative sanctions to de-escalate the situation. Therefore, the phrase did not want to hear probably needs clarification, Nikiforov, this guy said. Okay, so here we go. It becomes the blame game. Well, I told Zelensky that Russia was probably going to invade, so this is kind of all on him. Yeah, we sent the $40 billion and all that, and a bunch of Western weaponry that's been doing no good whatsoever. But this is kind of a problem for Zelensky now, isn't it? That's what Joe Biden was saying on the 11th of June, and this is why when I opened this series, I said in the first video, which was the Empire of Lies speech that I read, the U.S. is not coming to help you. They're going to send money, which is just going to be laundered. They're going to send weapons, which are going to be ineffective, or they're going to get you killed because Russian forces are going to target Ukrainian forces that are seen handling Western weaponry. It's going to bring you nothing but trouble. And in the end, they're going to wash their hands of Ukraine, and it'll be on to the next fish to fry. And that's what's going on. And I took some notes here because it's July 17th, and this whiteboard's a little outdated. I wrote this down a month ago, but I wanted to wait to actually finish this series conclusively because I could see where it was going, and I think now it's to the point of no return. Okay, so here are some notes I have. So the special military operation began on the 24th of February. It's currently July 17th. It's been, give or take, 5 months. Russian forces have captured and now control a landmass the size of Mississippi. They control 80% of the Donbas region, right? And that's the whole premise of the special military operation. And Putin said so. He wanted to go in and liberate the people of Donetsk and Luhansk in the Donbas region because they were being shelled and attacked by the Zelensky government. And they had credible intelligence that the Zelensky government was going to wage a full-scale war against the Donbas, and Putin said he had to go in to essentially save those people's lives from what would have effectively been a genocide. Anyway, the next to fall, based upon the map that I've been consulting, and I'll put it up for you to look at, because it's from the BBC, are the cities of Lysychansk, Siversk, Bakhmut, Slavyansk, Izium, and Kramatorsk. And I want to say Izium is probably, it may have already fallen, but it's literally being invaded as we speak. In the crosshairs for the Russian military are the major cities of Kherson, Mykolaiv, Odessa, Zaporozhye, and Kharkiv. And just so you know, Kharkiv is the second largest city in Ukraine. Odessa is number 3. Zaporozhye is number 6, and Mykolaiv is number 9. These are major population centers, and they are easily within a month or two of falling. If these major population centers fall, the Ukrainian military loses a large number of people from which it could possibly draw reserves. When you lose major population centers like this and everyone is displaced, you lose recruitment. Keep that in mind. Okay, now here's my prediction. Most likely Russia will take everything east of the Dnieper River, as well as Kharkiv in the north and Odessa in the south. Odessa has historically been a Russian city. If they've taken Crimea, Odessa's right there. Why wouldn't you? And Odessa is a major port city. Kharkiv is a Ukrainian city, but it has a large Russian population. And I want to say, next to Lviv, it is the closest off of Ukrainian borders. Lviv is extremely close to Poland. Kharkiv is extremely close to Russia. They're not going to allow Kharkiv to remain a Ukrainian city, being that close to Russian homeland. They're going to take Kharkiv. Kharkiv is the number 2 city in Ukraine by population. Okay, here's where it gets dicey. In the future, if you see Russian forces push west of the Dnieper River, it means negotiations have failed. Ukraine has nothing left to bargain, and there is nothing stopping Russia from taking everything west until it gets to the Polish border, which would be Lviv. And that essentially means that the country of Ukraine is extinct, that the Ukrainian forces will be annihilated, the Ukrainian people will be 100% displaced, they will no longer have a homeland. And I think Vladimir Putin is already laying the rails for this to happen. And on July 12th, earlier this week, a story broke that Putin offered all Ukrainian citizens Russian citizenship. So he's offering all Ukrainians a Russian passport. What does that tell you? Why would he do that? He's probably telling Ukraine is that I'm going to push as far as I have to, and I might have to take your entire country. However, if you want to avoid all that pain and anguish, come get your Russian passport. We'll give you safe haven in the territories we currently occupy. He's telling the Ukrainian people, listen, if your government doesn't see the way things are going to be, which is my way, then I'm going to take your whole country. But you have a way out. You do not have to fight in this war. You do not have to die. You don't have to watch your town be brought to rubble. Simply turn in your Ukrainian passport. You will be issued a Russian passport, and you will be a Russian citizen. You will be a citizen of the Federation, and you can take your place in Russian territory and wait for this all to end. He's going to extend that same benefit to Ukrainian soldiers. And it's going to give them more and more incentive as they see their numbers dwindle for them to go AWOL and to desert. That's what he's doing. It's a very good tactical move. But let's get down to brass tacks. The Ukrainian forces, and this is from Wikipedia, so take this with a grain of salt, but the Ukrainian forces from 2021 numbered around 250,000. That's 250,000 professional soldiers. Allegedly, they have 900,000 reserve soldiers. Not professionals, not fully trained, not fully battle ready. These guys could be veterans, they could be cops, they could be border guards, they could be 18-year-old kids who went to, basic training and then just, got sent home and were told to stand by. They have no formal training, they have no formal battle experience, they're green. 900,000. Russia, on the other hand, from 2021 numbers, had an army of 1 million. 1 million standing, professionally trained soldiers. I highly doubt Russia has committed more than half of that number to this war in Ukraine, which means they have at least 500,000 professionally trained soldiers still in Russia that could be deployed into Ukraine. 500,000. That's double the amount of Ukrainian forces that are currently combat active. Oh, and they had 2 million in reserve. I'm going to say at least 1 million of those guys have at least had basic training. According to Axios, this is a website, Ukraine is losing, and this is conservative, remember, this is Axios, and I had to really look hard to find how many losses Ukraine has suffered since the beginning. You'll get article after article about how many losses that Russia has potentially suffered, but when you want to find out Ukraine's losses, like, you really have to go on an Easter egg hunt. But according to Axios, in the Donbas region, Ukraine is losing 1,000 soldiers per day. And that was an article from June 15th, right around when Biden was starting to look for the exits. The Guardian, a UK outlet, is estimating that Ukraine is losing approximately 20,000 soldiers per month. Okay, so if you take 250,000 soldiers, divide it by 20,000 soldiers, which would be losses per month, according to Guardian, that's 12.5 months. That's just over a year it will take, at the current rate, for Ukraine to completely lose, either from being captured, killed, or wounded, its entire professional military. 1 year. If they lose their entire military, their professionally trained military, and they're able to equip and mobilize every single man in their reserve, they have 900,000 combat troops now. Let's say those untrained, completely green soldiers experience the same rate of losses, which they definitely will, 20,000 a month. They'll last approximately 45 months. So if you take the professional army, then take the reserves, the Ukraine military could only possibly last 57.5 months, or 4.8 years, which means in 4.8 years since the invasion, the Russian military will have annihilated the Ukrainian military. And that is being as conservative as you can be. That's saying that the reserve troops would be as combat effective as the 250,000 professional soldiers, which we know they won't. We know those 900,000 reserve troops are not going to be combat effective. They're going to be out of shape. They're going to be overweight. They're going to be way past military fighting age. They'll be like in their 50s. Some of them will be boys out of high school. It will be a catastrophe. And the Russian military and the Russian government doesn't want that catastrophe on their hands either. So I don't think it'll ever come to that. The 250,000 professional soldiers, though, yeah, they're going to be wiped out unless they surrender. That's the long and short of it. And the United States is walking away from it. Where was Joe Biden this week prior? Well, first he had to go to Israel, of course, because every U.S. president has to go to Israel at least once or twice for some reason, even though we share no, lucrative trade or like, anyway. That's a different episode. I might cover that on a different episode. But the real reason he went to Israel is because he wanted to go see the royal family of Saudi Arabia. Why would he want to see the Saudis? We need oil. Russia has answered the U.S. sanctions with their own sanctions. And the West, especially Germany and the UK, is going to get squeezed very hard by Russia's sanctions on the West for oil and natural gas. And the United States sees the storm on the horizon and knows we will be no exception to that pain. So they're going to the Saudis to beg for oil. And from what I gathered, the Saudis pretty much told them, yeah, your green energy plan doesn't really line up with our making money off of oil plan. So your green energy plan goes away if you want us to ramp up production. So they went away empty-handed. This is a catastrophe for the West and especially Ukraine. So Ukraine is done. I believe the Russian forces will take everything from Odessa eastward and everything from Kharkiv eastward. So you'll basically have this big crescent shape that will be carved out by the Russian military, and they'll most likely push it all the way to the Dnieper River. If they cross the Dnieper River and go further west, they'll take Kyiv, they'll take Lviv, they'll take the country. And you will have God knows how many millions of Ukrainian refugees after that happens. But if you look around the rest of the world, you have governments that are falling left and right. Like Sri Lanka just had a coup. I hear Ecuador is almost insolvent. You have Dutch farmers rioting in Amsterdam because the Dutch government wants to put them out of business with their new climate regulations. The whole world is literally hanging by a thread, it seems, economically. And there's a bigger thing, there's a bigger movie going on, right? This is a story within, like, think of the movie Pulp Fiction, right? If you remember the movie, there are little vignettes in the movie, but you have to watch the whole movie to understand where this little vignette, this little sidebar, has its place and why it matters. And I think the war in Ukraine has kicked off what is effectively known as the Great Reset. And that's actually the real reason I wanted to do this episode, this video for you. I'm going to cover 3 books that were written by the founder of the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab. And the books are The Fourth Industrial Revolution, COVID-19, The Great Reset. Yes, that's the full title of the book. And The Great Narrative for a Better Future. I'm going to start with The Fourth Industrial Revolution. It was written in 2017. COVID-19, The Great Reset was written in 2020. And The Great Narrative was written in 2021. So I'll do them chronologically. I've never read these books, but I want to understand how this guy thinks. And more importantly, I want to understand what the World Economic Forum, the International Monetary Fund, and the World Bank has in store for the globe. Because I think what's going on in Ukraine was Vladimir Putin telling the world he wasn't going to be a part of it and he was going to strike first while the getting was good. And I hope you stay tuned for that, because I'm going to be reading it, and I'm probably going to break each book into 3 parts. So it'll be 3 books, 3 parts, 9 episodes, and we're gonna dive into the mind of Klaus Schwab and find out what the World Economic Forum has planned. Why you see all this insanity, like literally falling like dominoes across the world. The United States, 9.1% inflation rate, like. It's almost like a hurricane of economic turmoil going on, and I cannot help but think this is pre-planned, right? There cannot be this much chaos, this much insanity going on in the world. Some of it looks straight up suicidal, to be honest with you. Some of these Western countries look like they are deliberately doing this to themselves and their own population, and doing it in concert with other nations. And you have to be savvy when you see these things, because it doesn't make sense in a vacuum on its own. Why the Dutch government would tell their farmers they have to reduce nitrogen output by 20%, which would effectively put all them out of business. Like, why would they do this to their own populations unless it was part of a bigger plan? And the bigger plan, I believe, is the Great Reset. And I wanted to cover this topic for a while. So I hope you all hang around for that. Like I said, I haven't read these books yet, so I'm going to try to get through them. I'm going to take my notes. We're going to read along with me as I read some passages, and we're going to try to parse this out. But the Ukraine war, that's in the bag. Russia won that one, whether you like it or not. They're going to take Ukraine, and it's now a question of how many people are going to die on account of it and how much of Ukraine they are going to take. But they are going to win that. And the Western nations hung them out to dry, and it's a tragedy. And years from now, we're going to look back on it, and I don't know what it's going to take. Hopefully this will convince the world that the United States, especially the United States, but the Western governments are not true to their word. They will help you out when it's convenient for them, and the moment things get rocky, they will cut you loose and your boat will just go sailing into the storm. They will not take you to safety. They will not bring you home. They will not save you. And you have to know that. Afghanistan found that out the hard way. Iraq found that out the hard way. Vietnam found that out the hard way. The United States doesn't win wars to fight evil. They don't fight wars to preserve democracy and to increase prosperity among the human race. The United States fights wars for the benefit of the United States. And when there's no longer a benefit, it's over. And overnight, the last plane wheels up and it's out. And then the wreckage is just left there smoldering. And Ukraine is going to be part of that wreckage. And as an American, I'm ashamed to say it, but that's the fact of the matter. So that'll be my last video for the war in Ukraine. We're entering a multipolar world, and now I want to cover the bigger picture, and that is the Great Reset. And I might come back to how this war fits into it, but we're going to cover the Fourth Industrial Revolution first, and that book and what it's all about. Okay, if you're liking the channel, I know I've been gone for a while, but it's good to be back. Give us a thumbs up or a subscription if you haven't subscribed yet. Share it with family and friends. Leave a comment what you think. And it's like, oh, Hoplite, your channel sucks, or oh, that's really good, or you could use some work on this. There's always room for improvement. But in any event, if you watch to the end, thanks again. We'll see you back here, and I'll start us off with the Great Reset series. Till then, take it easy.